page 57. Well, around 57. It might be 56.
Got to move it, Chair.
Okay, moved by Ange, seconded by Rob. Any questions? Any debate? All those for, any against?
Thank you for your contribution, Sean.
I'm pleased I stuck around.
It's up to your usual standards.
Okay, page 103. It's all done. Page 103. Page 103. Where are we? Item 15. 103? Where is that?
Item 15, page 103, 102.
No, it's not on 103.
Are you talking about the year update?
Yep.
What page is it on?
102.
102. Okay.
You ready for Sean? Go for it, Sean.
PX. Yep. Yes, Your Worship. Look, this report is really just formally giving you advice that I've already given councillors on a couple of occasions now to alert you to the fact that the Momentum Group, who are looking to find or secure funding and a new master plan for the theatre, will be reporting to you on the 6th of April. So I have nothing else to add to that.
Any questions? Moved by Rob. Any seconder? Seconded by Ange.
Can we move put the date into the recommendation?
Yep.
Yes.
All those for? Any against? Questions, sorry, Will. Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
Note that apparently you're on the panel, but in an advisory capacity only. Will you be advising them of the outcome of today's discussion and the forecast for the LTP?
Well, I wasn't planning to advise them specifically because they are already very, very aware that it's a difficult ask for council, so I hadn't been planning to, but I'm more than happy to pass that message on if you wish. Because
obviously every new council, and don't misperceive this statement, every new council is the absolute author of its own destiny. That's obvious, right?
Correct.
And the previous council set a direction, but this new council's got a lot of work to do to find the money. Secondly, are they also aware that this is called a Waikato Regional Theatre? And if you call something a Waikato Regional Theatre, that implies that a set of ratepayers, not just from one territorial authority, stumps up.
Yeah, well, in actual fact, it's the Momentum Waikato that began coining the phrase Waikato Regional Theatre, and for that very reason. But bearing in mind that a number of the funders that they have already had discussions with are Waikato-based, as opposed to necessarily being Hamilton-centric in any case.
Yeah, because it seems to me that as I get it, and I'm very, very complimentary, obviously, the Momentum Waikato, and I'm very complimentary of the consultants who seem very high quality, coming in. But I'm just anxious that you are, as our observer, conveying to the group that we're going to be looking with a micro detail around regional contribution, and just as this city may be looking at potentially some kind of targeted rate, debating it, then obviously we may be suggesting that the targeted rate might apply elsewhere outside the city boundaries, and I think that's number one. And I just think it's very important that you, if I may say, and maybe just my individual view. The other thing which I'll be really interested in the consultants is when they come back in terms of how you design a theatre, and this is just purely. For example, I went out to Mystery Creek the other day and they'd said that it had a symphony orchestra out there, and I'm not prejudging any of that, but what I'm really going to be interested in is that there's really thorough analysis as to what can be done in existing facilities. So it's just a matter of getting the right fit. For example, is it a major Aotea Centre, or is it more of a Stratford-upon-Avon significant theatre type? You know, and I'm totally open-minded, but I guess what's really important that you do report regularly to us, because I think that's going to assist the report. You know, these are the questions, obviously, when the report back comes to us, we'll be asking, and that's meant for me as an individual councillor to be very positive and very constructive.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Look, in terms of the first points you raised, I can assure you I have been giving them the hard word every time we meet and reminding them of the challenges and what we'll be looking for along the lines you've talked about. I think it will be a good opportunity for this council to actually also pass on any messages and questions when they come and meet with you to talk about progress. In terms of the work of the expert panel or the consultant that's assisting with that in terms of the utilisation, they are very, very clear on the need to consider all the different genres that might want to use a new theatre. They are also extremely aware and very clear that this is Hamilton and the Waikato that we're talking about, it's not Auckland. So they have done a lot of work around the world and the development of new theatres in towns or cities of our size, and so they know that this is not. They know it's not a city of several million people and everything
And
else.
it's, you know, stating that it seems to me that they've got a very excellent outfit that's assisting them, who's got, you know, very good reputation. And no disrespect to you personally, but we do have an arts advisor in this council, you know, on our council team.
Correct.
Presumably the relevant professional staff within our team are thoroughly involved with you in the ongoing development of this project.
Yeah, look, correct. What I should say, and I think I have mentioned it before, I have actually established within council what I call a sort of a shadow team, and they are there to sort of work behind the scenes in support of both the consultant and the panel with information and any advice on the ground. So that consists of obviously myself. It consists of Richard Sutherland, who was the manager of our for our theatres and was involved in the build of the Gallagher Performing Arts Centre, and it also includes Nicholas Wells, who's supporting on work to do with any property considerations.
So the other thing is, you know, we've got our LTP process coming up, and I suspect that may be now a little more challenging than it might have been, because I have to democratically respect the council decisions, of course. But what I want to focus on is that I'm really anxious that if we say talk about river plan, and this team is starting to focus on certain venues, you know, a hypothetical CBD venue, for example, or it's say focusing on a venue in the university precinct, or it's focusing on a venue where the Founders Theatre is, and bearing in mind some proposed developments which are now publicly noted in that area. It would be really important, I don't know how you do this, for us to get a bit of ongoing intel, and it's not sort of tying them down to site 1 or site 2 or site 3, but I'm very, very anxious that we do not spend a bit of money in our area. It might be on the river plan or talking about Greenbelt or whatever, when in fact there may be a proposal that's coming out of this group that could be contradictory, and I mean that, you know what I mean, which could change our own view as to how we develop a particular part of town.
Look, totally understand that, and they're certainly aware of that. They're aware of all the various plans that the council has generated over the last couple of years, and I guess if I'm aware that there is something coming up, it's beholden upon me to put the heads up into the mix. I am not privy to the consultants' views or thoughts at this stage as to where it goes. In fact, the Momentum panel are not, because the consultants are still actually working through those very options that you've raised. So I'm not privy of any direction or any specific place.
And a final observation, because you know when you do the final business plan, or you know as this develops, we will start talking about governance.
Yes.
And we will start talking whether it's a CCO model, because in fairness, if we talk regional theatre, I absolutely acknowledge the governance model is not, is significant. You know, that's obviously a significant discussion to be had, because there's obviously private sector money, there's a range of money, and how that particular governance model is put together to ensure the ongoing, dare I say it, viability and success of the project.
So you're absolutely right, and Momentum is actually working on that very leg of the equation themselves right now, and I've been assisting them with a fair amount of information that's come out of our various theatres review, the papers, the business case that the previous council saw on the refurbishment. So they are using all that information to wrap up some ideas on that governance model, and they are actually getting some expert advice, and they're just in the process of making that appointment now.
Without wanting to interfere in their final recommendation, in my view personally, I'm being very helpful, it might be a good idea, because we are a major stakeholder, obviously representing a major stakeholder, that by the time we do get to the final recommendation, there's no sort of great mystery, all will be revealed on a magic day. I think it's really important that appropriately they take us and the other key stakeholders on a journey along the way, because I think they will find very helpful feedback from us in a constructive way. It may be informal feedback, but I think if you see where I
Yes,
come
yeah,
from.
I get exactly what you're saying, and I have been discussing this with Leonard Gardner, who's the chair of the Momentum Group, in terms of how, no, it sounds cliche, how we stage manage that process.
Yeah.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much, Mayor Andrew. Well, I had a quick chat to you, Sean, yesterday about how much it costs to set up Claudelands for a theatre stage, and I know there is some challenges there with the acoustics and everything, but every year new things come out in the marketplace, isn't it, with panels and whatever. I mean, there's always new technology, is that right, to be able to change Claudelands into a theatre type style?
Yes, that's correct. Councillor Henry, there's always new options. We have, as I've said before, been reasonably successful with converting a number of founders-based shows into Claudelands. That has been expensive though, because we've had to build effectively stage houses inside Claudelands, so it is a very, very expensive item, and we have worn that cost on most cases. In the case of New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, yes, we have actually built some sound buffers. For those of you who went to the orchestra, you would have thought it was a nice sort of scene-setting props around them, but it was all about the sound. And we used those same panels at Mystery Creek. In fact, my tech services team from H3 actually did the stage management at Mystery Creek for when the NZSO played there. The only reason they played there on that occasion was because we had a booking conflict at Claudelands, otherwise they would have been back at Claudelands. And this year, I think that I've mentioned before, we've got 7 symphony orchestra performances at Claudelands on their schedule.
Oh,
In the arena, yeah.
That's really awesome. Well, look, I mean, we're always told we're cash strapped and all this, and yes, we might do targeted rates for the or whatever, what is it called? Waikato Regional Theatre. I just did some numbers, and I just, you said it's about between 14 and 20,000 to the cost for a show, or maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
We'll just go in that direction. So for each, so I just worked it out on, if it's just our money, the $30 million that we put in there, and we say we have 10 shows that we have to convert into that show outside of all the other things that are happening in Claudelands, because I don't think even founders did that many shows either.
Oh no, we would have done around 30 shows in terms of show days, so it would be quite a bit more than that. I mean, where you're heading to is quite obvious. If you put the number of events and the amount of cost on an annualised basis compared to the build, you're right, it's more cost efficient. But as I've also said, we have been losing a fair amount of business coming to Hamilton, and I shouldn't say business, but events coming to Hamilton that aren't coming here because they feel that the Claudelands format, despite our best endeavours, and they do appreciate it, really doesn't work that well. The Clarence Street Theatre has been good in that it's been able to pick up a reasonable amount of the founders' business, but once again, that's small. That's less than half the size. It's got a lot of constraints. So our biggest challenge is actually more to do with if we're talking about commercial productions and commercial shows, is convincing them that their type of show format can actually work in an arena of that size. And it's a very big challenge for us with some of the promoters. As I say, they've appreciated what we've done, but they are bypassing us now.
Okay, thank you so much. Otherwise, I mean, it would have been great to, we could have done, say, for 150 years, basically, shows on Claudelands for that money. Thank you.
The big test that we have, if I may just add, is that we have signed up with Hamilton Operatic to do stage Mary Poppins at Claudelands. We've all but signed the contract. They are actually advertising the dates now. And that will be a big test to see how that works in that format. And I've already got some teams that are pulling their hair out trying to see how we make that work, because it's a very different beast.
And wouldn't that be great if because sometimes you only just need one or two of these kind of shows to show all the other promoters that, hey, Claudelands actually does work, and it can do.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. Gary wanted me to ask about the 100,000 contribution towards concept design costs. Has that been used, yes, and what specifically is the plan for its use?
The 100,000 is matched by the Momentum Foundation, who have put in 100,000 as well, and that has actually been used specifically to pay for Charcoal Blue, who are the expert consultants who are currently doing the work to come up with the master plan.
So they'll come out with a design that we can look at and that sort of stuff?
Full design concepts and development costings and so forth, and then that will be accompanied by the business case, referring back to the Deputy Mayor's comments about the operating model going forward and costs and so forth.
Right. And maybe to the Chief Executive or Tracy, if she's around, with the $30 million loan that we would take out for our share, ballpark, what's that as a average rate per residential ratepayer? How many cups of coffee? Paid out, repaid over 25 years standard term of loan.
If I could just perhaps respond, I can't actually answer that specific question, but you may recall that when the Momentum proposal was first put to Council for consideration, I had put through some numbers that I foresaw would be the cost of operating the theatre. I did a comparison of Founders as it was, what it would be under a refurbished option, and then what it would be under the new rebuild. Now, I don't have it on me.
No, I was looking at the capital costs.
Yeah, no, that's right, that's what I'm talking about. The cost all up, including the cost of capital or the interest bill for the loan, plus the depreciation and everything else, it was going to come to around $5.5 million a year.
So that's about $100 per currently per ratepayer.
Yep, and that's what I think what was worked out yesterday on Tuesday with the Mayor's report in terms of the target rate for that was about $100 per ratepayer as well.
I just want to have that in their mind. Thanks.
Yep.
So when the Mayor was talking on Tuesday about his alternative proposals for funding, he talked about a potential targeted rate for the theatre, and he talked about $100 per ratepayer as well. So it sort of corroborates that.
Thanks.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of things around that. The Momentum Group, through their work, are in fact doing a thorough gaps analysis and needs analysis alongside their proposals, aren't they?
Yeah, they have actually got an awful lot of material that's in place now, because we did a very major review of all the theatre stock and inventory a few years ago when we reviewed the total theatre portfolio, in the days when Council was operating 3 theatres and part funding another. And so they've got all that work, they've got all the work that came out of the consultation process that we did after we closed Founders, and looking at the option to do nothing, refurbish, build new. And there was an awful lot of material came out of that for those consultants to use. They are also working quite closely with Creative Waikato and other parties that they've had one-on-one discussions with. So there's an awful lot of material they're referring to, but we're working hard not to reinvent the wheel on that front.
Cool, and they're aware of the funding envelope, so that's another thing that
very aware.
So they've got all that material, they've got the funding envelope. What they're going to propose to us is something that meets need. the gaps, fills the gaps, and that will consider things like size, type, location,
All of that.
and also I imagine they'll be wrapping it in what the other major funders' expectations are, because they're bringing money to the table.
Correct.
Right? And that whole outside of Hamilton debate yet to really be pursued actively.
Yeah, that's correct.
What does it mean for places like Morrinsville or Cambridge, etc.?
That's right. So the Creative Waikato did its spatial plan a couple of years ago now, and you may recall from that that the Founders Theatre at the time was raised as a big issue from a total Waikato perspective. So they have all that work.
Absolutely, and I support all that. So have supported all that. In terms of the use of Claudelands, following on from Councillor Henry's questions, and we went on that really excellent tour, and thank you for providing us a really close look at how it was operating. There are some opportunities that you were talking about, and there were some constraints of Claudelands. Now, we all want Claudelands to increase revenue and bring returns to the council. Now, am I right in suggesting that that previous report that we saw not that long ago, in the last meeting,
The quarterly report?
Yep.
Yep.
Made the point that the biggest opportunities are around securing conferences and making sure that all parts of the building are used on a regular basis, yeah?
That's correct. I mean, conferences or meetings are where the money is for that business, and we use the arena for that a lot, surprisingly, how often we use it. But in terms of performance activity, yes, we've had some increases in business levels as a result of founders coming into Claudelands, but I have to say it's not profitable business. So you might see a bit of a revenue going up, but there's a lot of cost that sits in behind it, so it doesn't add to the bottom line.
That accurately answers my question that I hadn't even fully finished. So thank you for that, because I guess we have to balance where we're trying to drive the business with Claudelands. You did also tell me, if I recall, that the staff, the technical staff, and all those wonderful people working around very hard there have very short changeover times between shows. Some of the sets are only suitable for one show and then not for another.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of hidden complications with just putting one performance after another.
The behind the scenes work is huge in terms of setting up lighting, sound, and then physical staging. It's big, heavy lift labour. I mean, it is pretty interesting when you go in there and the lights are full blazing at 1 a.m. and you've got a full crew on moving stuff around. So yeah, it gets pretty gnarly. But it used to be like that at Founders as well. Although it was purpose built, if you had sets, you'd have performers there doing rehearsals. You'd also have set people there doing rehearsals on the sequencing of how to shift and make sure their knuckles didn't get crunched.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure if this will be answered by the Momentum report, but I'm really looking forward to it. But I'd be interested in knowing, are there any other major cities of our size and nature that just have an arena-type theatre and no traditional form of theatre? You know, there's black box theatre, there's your auditorium theatre, etc. Are there any cities, I'm not asking you to answer it now, but I'll flag it because I will ask Momentum Trust, did they consider whether there were any cities that were successfully using a Claudelands-like arena for everything?
Yeah, Charcoal Blue...
Pardon?
Masterton.
Masterton's not comparable with Hamilton, is it?
I think you'll find that Charcoal Blue will be able to answer that question on an international scale for you, to give you a bit of an idea. In New Zealand, I do not think there is any city...
Sorry, I can't hear you. I can't hear Sean when everyone else is talking.
Sorry, Charcoal Blue will have a comment for you on that, and from their experience, I'll give you an idea around the world what's going on. But certainly in New Zealand, I don't know of any city that would be that. Just to remind you, the Claudelands arena is one of the biggest in the country. It's huge. It's even a small black box theatre that might be convertible for theatre activity or proscenium arts theatre activity would be much, much smaller, and a lot of the components of its design would be very, very different to what the Claudelands arena, how that's designed and configured, and right down to the sort of paint they use for sound reverberation and things like that.
Thank you, that answers all of my questions. Thanks.
Okay, should we go to... Have we got a mover? We have, yeah. Okay, should we go to the vote? All those for? Any against? Okay, last paper. Oh. You're on.
The motion was carried unanimously.
Okay, so the, we'll go into confidential at the end of the at the end because we've got minutes. But in the meantime, we'll go to the grassroots paper. Okay, Rob.
Yes, I've just got a couple of very simple questions, I hope. The project is going to cost around 600,000. Does that asset get vested into the as a council asset, given that we own the what's known as we call Seddon Park?
Yes, that's correct. It would ultimately become an asset on our property that we would have ownership of. That is quite similar to some of the other work where Northern Districts Cricket and other partners have provided funding for development upgrades at Seddon Park. So,
Yep. So my next question is, we're obviously then responsible for depreciation and maintenance?
I'd have to defer to our accountants on depreciation because we won't be actually putting any cash into the build of that asset itself. We will be required to provide support and assistance for ongoing maintenance, which is really what we currently do for the existing nets. So it will just be deploying.
Can I answer that question? As being the only staff-based accountant in the room.
Only chartered accountant?
In the room. Given it's our asset and ultimately would be on our site, it will be vested in us unless we have some form of agreement to transfer that ownership to Northern District Cricket. And if it's vested in us, we then depreciate it at the value it's vested in us at.
So we have another cost. What I'm coming to here is that, we receive this asset, it gets vested, we then have another $500,000 cost, which is a charge against our financial statements.
The question I have with Sean is who will ultimately be the owner of it?
Yeah, I think based on that question, we will ask that Northern Districts Cricket retain ownership of the asset.
Okay, and if they didn't...
And the obligation to replace it in the future.
Yeah, and if they didn't, then presumably we would look towards increasing their rental. As I understand it from the last question I asked about Seddon Park, we receive an annual rental, don't we, from Northern Districts?
Yes, it's a fixed rental for the term of the contract that we have. I mean, to give you context, this development has been discussed for a very long time as a need, and we have always responded as the property owner that we would be happy if they wanted that development to take place, but they would have to fund it, that we wouldn't. So it's always been on that very clear basis. Okay. Having said that, we've also said that our existing turf team and resources would obviously maintain the grass itself, if you like, on the wickets, just as they do for the rest of the site. It's little incremental work.
Yep, okay. So is it possible we can get some reporting back on how it ultimately lands in terms of where the asset ultimately lands? Because I'm worried, after this morning's debate, we now have another $500,000 worth of asset, which is going to be depreciated, which adds another cost to our OPEX for running the city. We also have potentially some operating expenses, which Sean suggests are not going to be significant. But, here we have an asset that we are presumably receiving but not necessarily making a decision on, and we have a bunch of costs that we're going to have to incur in future years.
Yes, I can give you the assurance it will update you, but ultimately, if you want to put that into the motion to make sure it's pinned down absolutely correctly.
No, look, I'm relaxed, but I'm just a little bit worried that every time we add these assets on, we end up with a whole bunch of new costs, which, is something you alluded to today, that, we've got this depreciation gap. This is another part of that gap, isn't it? Another addition to creating that gap even to a greater level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, thank you. Thanks, Sean.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah. First question I have is a process one. Aren't we required under the Local Government Act to have items given at least 2 days' notice, clear working days' notice before they come up, unless they're a urgent matter?
That's correct, Councillor McPherson. Having said that, at the time that the agenda is confirmed, the committee has the opportunity to accept or reject the additional item.
No, that's not the only time. The Local Government Act supersedes that, does it not? We have to have 2 days' notice.
No, standing orders derived from the requirements of the Local Government Act, and they are there to allow matters that need to be brought forward, and there's
Needs to be
conditions
brought
around
forward.
that.
So why does this?
Your
why
point
does this
is whether
need to
it's
be-
urgent.
My question is, why does this need to be brought forward ahead of the next meeting round?
I'll ask the GM to respond.
Yes, if I could respond to that. Look, this was very, very short notice to us that came from Northern Districts Cricket. They have had an indication from a number of parties that they would be able to raise the money to do this work in full if it's conducted in this financial year. And one of those funding sources or potential funding sources is Grassroots Trust. They advised Northern Districts Cricket a couple of days ago, I understand, or a few days ago, that the deadline that they would have to receive an application is the 22nd of March, and that really is what drove the urgency and the request from Northern Districts Cricket for us to bring this to you under urgency.
So let me get this straight. Grassroots advised Northern Districts Cricket that if they got an application, it could be considered by the 22nd. So then we get asked to put it in on behalf of Northern Districts Cricket. I'm smelling some, I don't know whether they're rats or something quite a lot bigger than a rat.
If I could comment on that, we've done this before in the case of Seddon Park for upgrades where external funding was required from some sources. Well, I think we may have done it for one of the theatres as well at one stage. They, in the case of Grassroots, they require that any applications come from the property owner as opposed to the tenant of a property.
Okay, that's some other questions which I do want to come into, because I think your point 6 is actually factually wrong and incorrect, and I'll give you some evidence on that shortly. Point 6 on page 3 of this report, but I just want to home in on the nod and the wink that you talked about from Grassroots given to Northern Districts Cricket.
Can I have an extension mover?
For the time of
Gary, a seconder. Thank you. Keep going.
Look, if I could...
No, I haven't finished my question yet, Sean. My understanding of the Gaming Act is that there cannot be any pre-decisions. They all have to be treated in an above-board fashion, and no one can give an indication that some money will be given until an application is actually put in, and that certainly no third party can be involved.
Look, I'm not aware that there has been a nod or a wink, or that there has been a pre-approval or anything, other than Northern Districts being advised, obviously when they had a conversation, that if they want to move fast, they need to get their application in by the 22nd of March.
Okay. So, going on to just following that up, why the 22nd of March? Because the Grassroots Trust website says applications have to be in by the 31st of March for the April round. They also say that you can put applications in before the end of each month and have them considered on the 4th week of the following month. So they actually have 12 rounds a year.
Look, I'm afraid I can't answer that question. I'd need to defer to Northern Districts Cricket, who advised us of that date.
Well, I'm sorry, we've got a report here that says point blank that you've told us that it has to be in by the 22nd. I look at the website to check, as a councillor should, I'm not saying everyone should do that, but as doing my job as a councillor, I look up what does it say, what do they say on their website, when do applications have to be in, how often are they dealt with? Well, they have to be in on the last working day of each month. They have to be dealt with, they're dealt with every month of the year. We're told this is urgent to come to our meeting with a few hours' notice coming here. I don't think, Mr Chair, that this should even be being discussed here because it's not needed. I don't know what their financial year is, But is it, do you know?
Look, I don't know, and I'm sorry, but I just took the advice from Northern Districts Cricket, who advised that that was their deadline date.
When I look at
and I did not check there.
When I look at the financial report, sorry, the website for Grassroots Trust, it seems to show that the year runs from 1st of April to the 31st of March each year. So if that's the case, and it also says that the Board of Directors of Grassroots Trust, any of you guys can look this up yourself, just type in Grassroots Trust. The Board of Directors of Grassroots Trust meets on the 4th week of every month to deal with the applications it's received up to the last day of the preceding month. So in other words, any application received before 31st of March is dealt with in the 4th week of April, and then an answer is given. That's a new financial year. It sounds to me, I'm sorry councillors, I just think this is totally out of order. It sounds to me like they're going to have it in on the 22nd of March, deal with it in those last few days. They've already told Grassroots, quick, get your application in. Sorry, Grassroots already told Northern Districts Cricket, and we somehow get landed in that and get told to rush the application. I've got a whole lot more concerns, but going on to point, I'm going to speak to this a bit more, going on to point 6, where this is a staff report, and staff reports are required to be checked, and so I don't buy the fact that we should be checking these things with Northern Districts Cricket. As the owner of Seddon Park, Hamilton City Council is required to apply to the Grassroots Trust for this funding. Now, I personally happen to have been the person that lodged a successful application on behalf of a sporting organisation in this city not so long ago, the Waikato Regional Volleyball Association, for money to Grassroots Trust for upgrading Council Park, Ashurst Park, to put in sand volleyball courts. We got the money for that. We did it ourselves. We didn't go to the council. We were not required, and there is nothing in the website saying that. We were not required to go there to get someone else to do it on our behalf. Certainly not required to get the owner to do it on our behalf. And there's no evidence anywhere that says that's the case. And I have, Mr. Chairman, I'm not quibbling about the issue of providing the facility there, which I'm sure is a good facility. I am quibbling about the way we have been tied up in some legal, I believe they're shenanigans. I'm not saying the staff knowingly have done this either, but I do think they should have been checked more closely. And I think as a point of process, we shouldn't have been... if we're going to receive put an item on an agenda because it's urgent, it has to be urgent. And there is evidence that they're dealing with it. At the best, there's evidence they would be dealing with it out of their normal published round of applications. Sorry.
What are the? Can I just ask the democracy manager something?
Yep.
What are the options for deferring this paper?
So I've been asked for advice on options for deferring the matter. So under procedural motions and standing orders, members have the right and opportunity to move procedural motions to either terminate or to adjourn discussion of an item. There are a number of options there which include adjourning to another meeting as long as that time and place is stated, or to close the motion under debate. It requires a mover and a seconder and majority of members present voting.
Mr. Chair, I would like to move a procedural motion then this matter lie on the table until the next meeting of council, and that staff prepare a report based on matters raised in this meeting concerning the item. And if there is a seconder for that, I'd be, for one, happy to provide the points I've got to Sean so they can be checked and verified one way or another. And if there's a second, I'd like to speak to that. Thanks, Mark. May I speak to that just briefly? I just think there are so many questions that the public could find out, and that we need to get answers. And I don't think we're disadvantaging Northern Districts Cricket if the issue is being handled in the normal way as published on the Grassroots website, which says there's a monthly application round. And so I have real concerns there. I also have a further concern that you know how this council applies for various activities or facilities to various trusts around the place, including in the last financial year, not this one, including to grassroots trusts for money for council priority activities that we determine, or we've got a committee that I think it's done through Paula's committee now. There was a smaller subcommittee the last 3 years, and this has not been run through that process. And, you know, we may cut out our chance of applying to the grassroots trust for something else that council wants if we accede to this thing done in a rush. So there may be some things that I don't know about, and that staff don't know about, but I have not said anything wrong in terms of quoting what's on the grassroots website. I'm also aware that Northern Districts Cricket themselves have 6 times in the last financial year, and this is all on the public website, applied for funds from the Grassroots Trust, 6 times successfully applied. On each occasion, they got 100% of what they asked for, which is extremely unusual for groups to get 100% of what they ask for when they apply to a gaming trust. They're one of the 4 biggest recipients of funds from this trust, and I don't have any objection to that, but I do think that they can sort of buy their own lunch, seems to me, rather than us sort of shouting them lunch. So I've got real big concerns. I'd like some answers, and we don't, in a sort of a less than 24-hour turnaround from receiving the report to now, we don't have the option to get decent answers out of staff, and they don't have the option, to be fair to them, to give us those answers.
Why are we applying for the money if grassroots have gone directly themselves and that's their only ground? I thought they couldn't in this case, and yet they're doing it all the time.
Look, clearly I need to double check the facts and what I've been advised, but my understanding has always been that as the property owner, we are required to do the application as opposed to the tenant. And as I said before, we have done this previously, which is why I didn't double check that. And we've done it for one of the theatres as well. So that's all I can say at this stage. I mean, if the suggestion from Councillor McPherson, I think under the circumstances is fine, and Northern Districts Cricket will just have to respond.
Yeah, I could point out not just my own organisation, which I'm no longer the executive member of, applies for funds for that. So does people like Waikato Netball for upgrade stuff at and facilities at Minogue Park, and the Waikato Rugby Union for some of their things that are run at the stadium. You know, all of the stuff that sportsing-wise just about in Hamilton City is done on council grounds, and you can see dozens and dozens of organisations that get grassroots funding in here direct to their clubs, and it's not Hamilton City Council having to apply for them.
Okay, well, as this is a procedural motion, there's no speaking rights, so we just go straight to the vote. So,
if the mayor lets you.
It's not about the subject.
The only question I have, just remind us if there's a so-called deadline.
So the challenge that we put forward, there was a deadline. The challenge that Councillor McPherson's put forward is that the deadline that we were given seems to be completely disconnected from what they're advertising as their deadline on the website. So I'm going to answer at this point in time, we have no idea what the deadline is, and therefore, based on that, it's probably not as urgent as what we're led to believe at this point in time. So I support the decision to bump this until we have further information and we can actually have an informed decision.
Okay, so we'll go
Got that you need my support.
On the board, please. So,
Yeah.
Which is the thing down the bottom.
Yes.
Yeah.
so just hang on, just to be clear on what's happening here, I'll get Leanne to explain, because this isn't normal.
No, it's not normal. Procedural motions are about the conduct of business. So what Councillor McPherson has done is moved a procedural motion that this item of business be adjourned until the next meeting of council.
Okay, let's go to the board.
The procedural motion is carried. 10-4, 3 against.
Okay, we'll now go to public excluded.